Thanks for staying with us here on The Real Story. We're officially entering the mad dash to midnight May 8th. Lawmakers facing less than 2 weeks to pass meaningful legislation between their chambers and get it to Governor Lamont's desk. Last week on The Real Story, we detailed the latest on the budget back and forth and how the fiscal guardrails are impacting state priorities. What we knew from the start would be the story of this session. This week, we started to get some real numbers in response to the several budget wants and needs we broke down last episode. But with those problems no one was expecting, like state agencies overspending and pension requirements being higher, there's still a lot up in the air. Governor Lamont says the budget needs to be balanced, fix those gaps in state spending, and also stay within each of the 3 fiscal boundaries. That's easier said than done, though. Things like funding to towns for early voting has gotten multiple different answers. Earlier this week, leaders said it wouldn't happen. Now they're taking that back. State worker raises are officially approved, and leaders have now told nonprofits they can't swing the 5% they asked for, but they should be getting a 2.5% increase. Some lawmakers say that's better than nothing. Others, though, wanted to see flexibility and say those nonprofits who showed up in droves to the Capitol this week deserve more. Beyond the budget battle, there are still more than 600 bills waiting for action, with, again, less than 2 weeks left in the session. Now, proposals are passing through the chambers, not the least of which a number of police reforms. So what do you need to know about that? Aerial surveillance tech could be a statewide tool used by departments even more, as lawmakers talk about creating a grant program which would reimburse police drone purchases and potentially some repairs as well. Several towns already have their troopers operating drones. Somewhat recently, Hartford making headway with illegal ATV crackdowns using sky surveillance. Civil rights advocates are worried, though, about expanding the tech with concerns around privacy and racial profiling. They want the session to be focused on regulation right now instead of more funding. While lawmakers feel those fears, they've also created a new potential ban as to who can sell police department surveillance drones. In an effort to protect against foreign spying and hacking, they're taking up a proposal that would prohibit any Chinese and Russian-made drones, saying their software could be detrimental. The state grants would go toward licensed scanners too, which come with a lot of the same concerns for many. But police departments told lawmakers recently it's one of their best tech tools and being used a lot more frequently. Lawmakers also looking at a bill that would altogether change traffic stops. They're getting closer to preventing officers from pulling someone over for certain offenses deemed secondary traffic violations. Supporters say this measure would reduce unnecessary traffic stops and interactions with police, building more trust between officers and the community. But those opposed argue this would take away important resources from law enforcement.
I've seen what over-policing does to communities. I'm a product of over-policing in communities.
Louis Mattei Jr. is formerly incarcerated, serving almost 20 years in Connecticut prisons. Now he's a smart justice leader for the ACLU, fighting for what advocates call driving equity.
Being pulled over and knowing you have nothing illegal in the car, nothing illegal going on, but yet feeling the stress and trauma of not knowing what is about to happen.
Mattei is pushing for a new bill which he says would lessen interactions between people of color and police when they're unnecessary. The measure would establish so-called secondary traffic violations and would prohibit officers from stopping someone just for those specific offenses.
Why worry about the person who has a vanity cover over their plate as opposed to the person who's cutting everyone off in traffic?
These secondary violations are less serious infractions like window tints, not having 2 working headlights, failure to renew registration or driver's licenses, or not carrying a driver's license while driving. Officers would still be able to enforce these violations during a traffic stop for a primary offense.
They don't have to feel so alienated or feeling as though they're criminals because they got an air freshener hanging from their mirror.
The ACLU calls these unnecessary stops and says pulling over drivers for these administrative or minor equipment issues creates a pathway to discriminatory policing. But those opposed to this legislation say it poses significant risks to public safety by taking away tools from police. In a statement, Republican State Representative Greg Howard says this bill is, quote, another attempt by legislative Democrats to limit traffic enforcement in our state, adding, quote, Democrats are using their go-to message that police in Connecticut are racist, and this bill will solve that.
We're not trying to take away tools from the police, but allow them to focus on things that better suit community needs by making their job more efficient.
Representative Howard has actually introduced 16 different amendments to that bill, those amendments yet to be called and the bill yet to be voted on the House floor, with again that May 8th session deadline looming. He and other Republicans have pushed back against most police reforms on the table this session, saying they feel these proposals aren't supporting police authority, claiming this will keep lowering morale and messing up recruitment.
The day they can put a police officer in front of me that says, geez, Greg, I'd really like to get to those speeders, but I'm so darn busy with the out taillights I can't get to it, then I'll listen. How is this bill going to help recruitment and retention? It's not.
When it comes to police proposals this session, tragedy and grief are certainly still on display at the state capitol, inspiring other potential new laws. The first, a fallen officer fund. After multiple police were killed in the line of duty last year, communities have stepped up to raise money to support those officers' families. But many lawmakers say they just shouldn't have to. So they're planning to vote on something other places in the country have already, a state-supported fund for those whose loved ones were killed. But what about canines? After the recent death of state police dog ROKU, lawmakers are discussing a potential restitution law, meaning anyone who injures or kills a police canine would be guilty of a Class D felony. And if the dog is injured, the court would make them pay veterinary services. If the dog dies or can't do their job anymore, the person responsible would be legally required to cover the costs of training a replacement canine. Of course, there are more than 600 bills every day. We've got your close and continuous coverage of all things 2024 legislative session. If you want to watch these segments again, you can head to fox61.com or download the Fox 61 News app and watch The Real Story every Sunday at 10 a.m. right here on Fox 61 or streaming on Fox 61 Plus. Have a great morning.